Hello everyone and welcome back to Shadow Man Stories. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's get you comfortable and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Rebecca Mountainheart, and I wish I'd never heard of Mother's Mountain. I'm an anthropologist, fancy word for someone who studies people and their stories. For 15 years, I've traveled all over Appalachia, collecting the old tales before they disappear forever. Mountain folk have the best stories, passed down through generations like precious heirlooms. That's what brought me to Granny Opal Sizemore's cabin in May of 1975. The university needed me to finish my folklore collection, and she was supposed to be the last real mountain storyteller in these parts. Her cabin sat way up in the Smokies, accessible only by a winding dirt trail that made my car groan and complain. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, wrong quiet. No bird songs, no rustling leaves, nothing. Just the sound of my boots on the wooden porch, and my heart beating a little too fast. Granny Opal was tiny, maybe 90 pounds soaking wet, with white hair pulled back in a tight bun. But her eyes were sharp as broken glass, and when she looked at me, I felt like she could see straight through to my bones. "You're the Cherokee girl from the university," she said before I could introduce myself. Not a question. "Half Cherokee," I corrected, touching the turquoise necklace my grandmother gave me. "I'm here about the stories you mentioned in your letter." She nodded and led me inside. The cabin was one room with a wood stove, a table, 2 chairs, and a bed covered in handmade quilts. But what caught my attention was the wooden cradle in the corner, filled with baby blankets and tiny clothes that looked like they'd never been worn. "Whose are those?" I asked, setting up my tape recorder. Granny Opal glanced at the cradle, and for just a second, her face went soft and sad. "Babies that never got to grow up," she said quietly. "Been collecting those things for 60 years. Never could say why." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "What babies?" But she'd already moved on, pouring sweet tea into mason jars. "You want stories about these mountains? I got plenty. Some you'll want to write down, some you won't." I spent the afternoon listening to tales about spirit bears and hidden Cherokee gold, filling tape after tape. Standard mountain folklore. But as evening shadows crept across the valley, Granny Opal's voice changed. "There's one story I ain't never told nobody," she said, staring out the window at the mist rolling down the mountainside. "About the mother." My pen stopped moving. Something in her tone made my skin crawl. "What mother?" "The one who takes care of all the lost babies. She lives up on the peak they call Mother's Mountain. Ain't on no maps, but every woman in these hills knows where it is. Been taking care of the little ones for more than 100 years. The way she said it made it sound like a good thing, but everything inside me screamed that it wasn't. Takes care of them how? Granny Opal was quiet for so long I thought she'd forgotten my question. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Women used to go up there when their time came. Dangerous births, babies that wouldn't make it. She'd help them through, one way or another. But the babies that died..." She trailed off, looking at the cradle again. "They never really left." A stick cracked outside, loud as a gunshot in the silence. We both jumped. "That's probably my great-grandson Tommy," Granny Opal said quickly, but her face had gone pale. "He comes by to check on me." But nobody knocked on the door. Nobody called out. The silence stretched until it felt like it might snap. "Maybe I should head back to town," I said, reaching for my recorder. "No." Her voice was sharp now, urgent. "Don't drive these roads in the dark. You can sleep here tonight. Tommy's room is empty. He's staying with his folks this week." I wanted to argue, but she was right about the roads. One wrong turn in the dark, and they'd find my car at the bottom of a ravine come morning. As I settled into the narrow bed that night, listening to the wind whistle through the trees, I couldn't stop thinking about that cradle, about the mother who took care of lost babies, and about the way Granny Opal kept glancing toward the window like she was watching for something, or someone. I woke up before dawn to the sound of crying. At first I thought it was just the wind, but as I lay there in the dark, I realized it sounded like a baby, a newborn, with that desperate, heartbreaking wail that makes every woman want to pick it up and comfort it. I slipped out of bed and crept to the window. The mist was so thick I could barely see 10 feet, but the crying was definitely coming from outside, from up the mountain. You hear that too? I spun around. Granny Opal was sitting up in her bed, fully dressed like she'd never gone to sleep. A baby, I said. Should we? No. Her voice was flat, final. You don't go toward that sound. Ever. The crying faded as the sun came up, but it left a hollow ache in my chest that I couldn't explain. Over breakfast, I tried to get Granny Opal to talk about what we'd heard, but she just shook her head and changed the subject. That's when Tommy showed up. He was 16, all arms and legs and serious dark eyes. His great-grandmother introduced us, and he nodded politely enough, but I could tell he didn't trust me. What kind of stories you collecting? He asked, eyeing my recorder like it might bite him. Traditional folklore, legends, ghost stories, that sort of thing. Some stories ain't meant to be told to outsiders, he said quietly. Granny Opal shot him a warning look, but he ignored it. Especially stories about the mother. My pulse quickened. You've heard of her? Every kid around here has. We know better than to go up that mountain alone, especially women. He glanced at his great-grandmother. Tell her, Granny, tell her why. Tommy, my sister Sarah went up there 3 years ago, he continued, his voice tight. She was 18, pregnant, scared. Thought the mother might help her somehow. We found her clothes by the hidden cemetery, but we never found Sarah. The air in the cabin suddenly felt thick and hard to breathe. What hidden cemetery? I asked. Granny Opal sighed, looking older than her 89 years. Up on Mother's Mountain, place where they buried all the babies that didn't make it. Been going on for generations. Cherokee women first, then the settlers who came after. How many babies? Nobody knows for sure. Maybe 200, maybe more. I felt sick. 200 dead infants, buried in secret on a mountain peak. It was exactly the kind of tragedy that could leave a spiritual mark on a place. I need to see it, I said. No. Tommy and Granny Opal spoke at the same time. I'm a professional anthropologist, I argued. This is important historical documentation, cultural preservation. Some things should stay buried, Tommy said, but I could see the conflict in Granny Opal's eyes. Part of her wanted the story told, wanted someone to remember all those lost babies. After an hour of gentle pressure, she finally gave in. I'll draw you a map, she said reluctantly. But you go during the day. You take water and a flashlight. And if you start feeling wrong, you come back immediately. What kind of wrong? She looked at me for a long moment, then walked over to the cradle and picked up one of the tiny blankets. As she held it, her face changed, becoming younger somehow, softer. Like you're carrying a baby, she said quietly. Like you're going to be a mama. I laughed, couldn't help it. At 41, with no husband and no prospects, that ship had sailed long ago. But Granny Opal wasn't smiling. It's what she does, she whispered. The mother. She makes you feel what all those women felt when they climbed that mountain. The hope, the fear, the love. And if you ain't careful... What? You might decide. You want to stay. That afternoon, I followed Granny Opal's hand-drawn map up a barely visible trail that wound through thick forest. The silence was even worse here than at the cabin. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just my footsteps on the leaf-covered path and the sound of my own breathing. The cemetery wasn't marked. I almost walked right past it, hidden as it was among the laurel bushes and mountain holly. But something made me stop and look closer. Dozens of small stones arranged in circles. No headstones, no names, just weathered rocks marking where tiny bodies had been laid to rest. Some of the circles were so old they'd almost disappeared, swallowed by moss and time. I set up my camera and started taking pictures, trying to count the graves. 50, 75, 100. That's when I heard it again. The crying. This time it was closer, coming from somewhere behind the trees. I followed the sound, my heart pounding, until I came to a cave mouth hidden by hanging vines. The crying was definitely coming from inside. I pulled out my flashlight and pushed through the vines. The cave was bigger than I'd expected, with passages leading off in several directions. And everywhere, carved into the walls, scattered on the floor, were more baby clothes. Blankets and booties and little caps, all perfectly preserved in the cool, dry air. The crying echoed from deeper in the cave, pulling me forward like a rope around my chest. I followed the sound through twist after twist, until I couldn't see the entrance anymore. That's when I saw her. A woman in a white dress, sitting on a natural stone ledge with her back to me. She was nursing a baby, humming a lullaby that made my throat close up with unexpected emotion. "Hello?" I called softly. She turned, and I saw the most beautiful face I'd ever seen. Ageless, serene, with eyes full of infinite love and infinite sadness. "I've been waiting for you, Rebecca," she said, and her voice was like water over stones, like wind through wheat, like every lullaby ever sung. The baby in her arms gurgled and reached for me with tiny fingers. "Would you like to hold him?" the mother asked. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. The baby was perfect. Pink cheeks, dark hair, eyes that seemed to see right into my soul. He needed me. I could feel it. I reached out, and my hand passed right through him. The mother smiled sadly. "Not yet," she said. "But soon, very soon, you'll understand." I stumbled backward, tripped over something, fell hard on the cave floor. When I looked up, she was gone. But the crying continued, coming from all around me now. Dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, all calling for their mothers. I ran, crashed through the cave, tearing my clothes on the rocks, not caring about anything except getting out, getting away, getting back to the world where dead babies stayed dead and beautiful women didn't appear in dark caves offering impossible children. I didn't stop running until I reached the cabin. I should have left that night, should have packed my equipment, driven back to the university, and filed my report on standard Appalachian folklore. Instead, I stayed, because I couldn't stop thinking about that baby. The next morning, I woke up nauseous. Probably just stress, I told myself, but my breasts felt tender, and there was a strange fluttering in my stomach that made me press my hand against my belly without thinking. "You went up there," Granny Opal said when she saw me. It wasn't a question. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "And you saw her?" Another nod. Granny Opal's face went gray. God help us all. Dr. Richard Blackwood arrived that afternoon, driving up in his spotless sedan like he was visiting a foreign country. He was my colleague from the City, brilliant, skeptical, and completely dismissive of anything that couldn't be measured or cataloged. "Rebecca, you look terrible," he said, climbing out of his car with his usual lack of tact. "Are you getting enough protein? These mountain people probably live on beans and cornbread." I wanted to tell him about the mother, about the cemetery, about the impossible baby I'd almost held. Instead, I just said I was tired. "Well, let's get this project finished so we can go home," he said, unpacking his own recording equipment. "I've got a faculty meeting on Monday." But as the day wore on, Richard started acting strange. He kept glancing at me with worried eyes, asking if I was warm enough, if I needed to sit down, if I was sure I felt okay. "You're being weird," I told him. "I'm being protective," he said, and something in his voice made me look at him sharply. "Someone needs to take care of you." That night, I had the dream. I was back in the cave, But this time it was warm and welcoming, filled with soft light and the scent of wildflowers. The mother was there, but she wasn't alone. Dozens of other women sat in the shadows. Cherokee women in traditional dress, pioneer women in calico, mountain women in homespun. All of them had babies in their arms. "We've been so lonely," the mother said, standing and walking toward me. "So very lonely without our children." "They're not real," I whispered. "They're as real as love," she replied. "As real as hope. As real as the need every woman has to hold her baby close." She placed her hand on my stomach, and suddenly I could feel it. A flutter, a movement, a tiny life growing inside me. "You can keep him," she said. "I can make it real. All you have to do is stay." I woke up gasping, my hands pressed to my belly. For just a moment I could swear I felt something moving in there. The nausea was worse the next morning. I threw up twice before breakfast, and when Granny Opal saw me clutching my stomach, her face went white. "How far along?" she asked quietly. "I'm not pregnant," I snapped. "I can't be pregnant. I'm 41, I'm not even seeing anyone, and I had my period 2 weeks ago." But even as I said it, I was counting days in my head. When was my last period? 3 weeks ago? 4? Time seemed fuzzy, uncertain. Richard was even more protective than before, insisting I sit down every few minutes, bringing me water, hovering like an anxious father-to-be. It should have annoyed me, but instead it felt right, like he was supposed to take care of me, take care of us. Us? "I think we should leave," Tommy said that afternoon, pulling me aside while Richard was interviewing his great-grandmother. "Today. Right now." "Why?" "Because you're changing," he said simply. "Same way Sarah changed before she disappeared. You keep touching your stomach. You're walking different, and Mr. Blackwood there is acting like he's your husband or something." I looked down at my hands. He was right. I had been touching my stomach, cradling it like there was something precious inside. "It's not real," I said, as much to myself as to him. "Does it matter? If it feels real to you?" That evening I went back to the cemetery. I told myself I was going to debunk the whole thing, to prove that psychological suggestion was making me imagine symptoms that couldn't possibly exist. The hidden cemetery looked different in the evening light. The stone circles seemed to glow softly, and flowers had appeared, wildflowers in patterns that looked almost like tiny faces. As I walked among the graves, I found myself speaking to them. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry none of you got to grow up." The crying started again, but this time it didn't frighten me. It sounded like lullabies, like love songs, like all the word mothers sing to their babies in the dark. I found myself sitting in the middle of the cemetery, cross-legged on the soft earth, humming along with voices only I could hear. My hands moved in serves, bells on my stomach, soothing the baby that wasn't there. That's where Richard found me an hour later. "Rebecca, Jesus Christ, we've been looking everywhere for you," he said, but his voice was gentle, concerned. He helped me to my feet, his hands protective on my arms. "You're ice cold. How long have you been out here?" "I was talking to them," I said dreamily. "They're so lonely, Richard. All these babies, they just want their mothers." He looked around the cemetery, and I saw him count the graves, saw the shock and horror on his face when he realized what this place was. "We're leaving," he said firmly. "Tonight. Right now." But as we walked back toward the trail, I felt something wet between my legs. I looked down and saw blood, bright red on my jeans, spreading in a stain that looked exactly like what happens when a woman loses a baby. "No," I whispered, falling to my knees. "No, please. I'm sorry. I'll be better. I'll stay. Just don't take him away." Richard knelt beside me, his face pale with fear. "Rebecca, you're not pregnant. You can't be losing a baby you don't have." But my body didn't believe him. The cramping started, wave after wave of pain that doubled me over. I could feel something passing out of me, something that had been alive just moments before. She's taking him back, I sobbed. The mother's taking my baby back. That's when we heard her voice floating down from the mountain peak like mist. Come home, Rebecca. Come home to me. I'll give him back. I'll give you as many as you want. All you have to do is stay. Richard picked me up and carried me back to the cabin, but I could hear her calling all the way down the mountain. Calling my name, calling me home, promising me everything I'd ever wanted if I would just climb back up to where she waited. By morning, the bleeding had stopped, but the pain in my heart hadn't. I lay in Tommy's narrow bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to convince myself that none of it had been real. But my body told a different story. My breasts were still tender, still swollen. My stomach was still loose and dead, still sensitive to touch. And deep inside, I could feel an emptiness that made me want to curl up and die. She's making you feel what they felt, Granny Opal said quietly. She was sitting beside the bed, holding one of the baby blankets from the cradle. All those women who climbed the mountain, all those mothers who lost their babies. Why? My voice came out as a croak. Because she was one of them. Once, long time ago. Cherokee woman who lost 7 babies before they took their first breath. The grief drove her mad, and when she died, she couldn't let go. Just kept collecting the sorrow of every woman who came after. What does she want from me? Granny Opal was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. To not be alone anymore. She's been carrying all that grief, all that loss, for more than a century. She wants to share it. Make someone else understand what it feels like to lose everything. Richard appeared in the doorway, his face haggard. We're leaving, today. I don't care if I have to carry you to the car. You can't, Tommy said from behind him. Look outside. We did, and my heart sank. The mist had rolled down thick as cotton, so dense we couldn't see the porch railing. But it wasn't natural fog. It moved wrong, twisted in patterns that hurt to look at, and every now and then I could swear I saw shapes in it. Women's faces, babies' hands, eyes that followed our movements with desperate hunger. She won't let me leave, I said, understanding flooding through me. Not until I give her what she wants. What does she want? Richard demanded. I looked at him, at his protective stance, at the way he kept glancing at my stomach like he could see something there. She wants me to choose. Stay with her and the phantom baby, or leave and lose it forever. There is no baby, he said desperately. Tell that to your sub-C. Anxious, Tommy said quietly. You've been acting like an expectant father for 2 days, Mr. Blackwood. She's got hooks in you, too. That's when Granny Opal stood up, her face set with determination. There's only one way to end this, she said. Someone has to go up there and face her. Really face her, not just see her in dreams and shadows. Someone has to acknowledge what she is, honor what she's lost, and help her let go. I'll go, I said. No, Richard and Tommy said together. It has to be me, I continued. She chose me for a reason. Maybe because I understand what it feels like to want children you can't have. Maybe because I'm strong enough to say goodbye. The mist parted just enough to reveal the trail leading up the mountain, like she was inviting me, daring me. I stood up, ignoring the dizziness, the cramping, the way my body still insisted I was losing something precious. If I don't come back, you're coming back, Richard said firmly. I'll make sure of it. How? Granny Opal reached into her jewelry box and pulled out a small leather pouch. Cherokee Women's Protection Medicine, she said, tying it around my neck. Made by my great-grandmother. It won't stop her, but it might help you remember who you are. I climbed the mountain as the sun set, following the trail that seemed to glow in the mist. My legs shook with every step, but I forced myself to keep going. Behind me, I could hear Richard calling my name, but his voice grew fainter and fainter until I couldn't hear it at all. The cemetery was different this time, The wildflowers had multiplied, covering every grave in a blanket of color, and standing among them, waiting for me, was the mother. But now I could see her clearly. She wasn't just one woman, she was dozens, maybe hundreds, all the mothers who had lost children on this mountain. They flickered in and out of focus, young and old, Cherokee and white, pioneer and modern, all bound together by the same devastating grief. "You came back," she said, and her voice was like wind through the trees, like water over stones, like every lullaby ever sung to a sleeping child. "I came to say goodbye," I told her. "To the baby? He's still here, still waiting for you." She held out her arms, and there he was, perfect, beautiful, reaching for me with tiny hands. Every maternal instinct I had screamed at me to take him, to hold him, to never let him go. But I forced myself to look closer, to really see. He wasn't alive. None of them were. They were shadows made of grief, phantoms crafted from desperate love and impossible hope. "I can't keep him," I said, tears streaming down my face. "He was never really mine." The mother's face crumpled with rage and sorrow. "You would abandon your own child?" "I would set him free." I looked around at all the small graves, at all the lost possibilities buried in this hidden place. "Just like you need to set all of them free." "I can't," she whispered. "If I let them go, I'll be alone. I'll have nothing left." "You'll have peace," I said gently. "You'll have rest. You'll have the chance to let go of the pain." The phantom baby in her arms began to fade, becoming translucent, then transparent, then nothing but mist and memory. "No!" she screamed, and the sound shattered the night like breaking glass. The mist around us turned red, violent, full of rage and loss, and a century of accumulated grief. She came at me then, not the beautiful mother, but the truth of what she was. Grief given form, loss made manifest. All the terrible pain of every woman who had ever lost a child concentrated into one impossible entity. But as she reached for me, my hand closed around Granny Opal's medicine pouch, and I remembered who I was. Not a bereaved mother, not a vessel for someone else's pain, but Rebecca Mountainheart, anthropologist, keeper of stories, bridge between worlds. "I see you," I said quietly. "I honor your loss. I acknowledge your pain. But I won't carry it for you anymore." She stopped inches from my face, her eyes wide with surprise. "All those women," I continued, "all those babies, they deserve to be remembered. But they also deserve to rest. You've been holding on to them for so long, but holding on is hurting you. Hurting them." "I'm their mother," she whispered. "You were a mother, once, but now you're something else. Something that keeps the dead from finding peace." The red mist began to fade. Around us, the wildflowers started to wilt and fall, returning to the earth where they belonged. "Let them go," I said. "Let yourself go. You've suffered enough." She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw not a monster but a woman, tired, grieving, ready for rest after more than a century of pain. "Will you remember them?" she asked. "I'll remember them all." She nodded, and as she did, she began to fade. Not violently, not with rage, but peacefully, like mist dissipating in the morning sun. Around the cemetery, I could see other shapes dissolving, all the phantom children, all the borrowed grief, all the impossible hope returning to wherever such things come from. The last thing I heard was her voice, finally at peace. "Thank you." I woke up in my own bed at the university, with no memory of how I'd gotten there. Richard was sitting in a chair beside me, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "How long?" I asked. 3 days. You collapsed in the cemetery. We brought you down, called an ambulance. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong with you, but you wouldn't wake up." I sat up slowly, taking inventory. The phantom pregnancy symptoms were gone. No more nausea, no more tenderness, no more sense of carrying something precious inside me. But there was something else, a fullness in my chest that had nothing to do with physical symptoms. The stories, I said. I remember all their stories. Richard looked at me strangely. Whose stories? The mothers, the babies, all of them. I swung my legs out of bed, surprised by how steady I felt. I have work to do. I never finished my folklore collection for the university. Instead, I resigned my position and moved to a small house near the Smokies. I spend my days now collecting different stories, not legends and myths, but real histories. The names of women who climbed that mountain, the dates when babies were born and died, the family connections that link the past to the present. Tommy visits me sometimes. He's learning the old ways from his great-grandmother's friends, becoming a bridge between the modern world and the traditions that shape these mountains. He tells me Granny Opal is doing better, that she sleeps peacefully now for the first time in years. The cradle full of baby clothes is gone from her cabin. She donated everything to expectant mothers in the area, saying it was time for those things to be used for the living instead of keeping vigil for the dead. I've been back to the cemetery once. It's different now, peaceful instead of hungry, sad instead of desperate. The wildflowers still grow there, but naturally now, scattered by wind and weather rather than arranged by phantom hands. I've started a project to have it properly marked and protected as a historical site. The babies deserve to be remembered, but they also deserve to rest in peace. Sometimes, on foggy mornings, I think I hear crying from the mountains. But it's not the desperate wail of the lost anymore. It's softer, gentler, like the sound a mother makes when she's putting her child to bed with a lullaby and a kiss. The mother's mountain is just a mountain now. But I know what it used to be, and I carry those stories with me wherever I go. After all, someone has to remember. My name is Eleanor Ashworth, and I've been a park ranger in the Blue Ridge Mountains for 8 years now. People think it's a quiet job, but they're wrong. These mountains keep secrets, and sometimes those secrets kill people. It was October 28, 1978, when everything started. I was sitting in my ranger station drinking coffee and checking weather reports when the radio crackled to life. Base, this is Deputy Marcus Greenberg. We got a missing family. The Brennans, 2 adults, 2 kids, last seen heading toward Hunger Hollow. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. Hunger Hollow. Of all the places in these mountains, it had to be there. Copy that, Marcus, I said into the radio. How long they've been missing? 2 days now. Found their car at the trailhead. Camping gear's gone. I knew the place well. Too well. It's a box canyon about 15 miles from the nearest road. The Cherokee used to bury their dead there until settlers came and dug everything up looking for gold. Then during the Civil War, 30 Confederate deserters hid in that hollow. They all starved to death. That's how it got its name. The locals won't go near it. My grandmother used to tell me stories about that place when I was little. Bad things happen where people suffer and die hungry, she'd say in Cherokee. The land remembers. The land gets hungry too. I used to think those were just old stories. Used to. Marcus arrived at my station 20 minutes later. He's a good man. Tall, dark hair, kind eyes. We'd been seeing each other in secret for 6 months. Dating a deputy could cost me my job, but some risks are worth taking. Eleanor, I know what you're thinking, he said before I could speak. But we got to go up there. Those kids. I nodded. The children were 12 and 8 years old, Amy and Jake Brennan. I'd seen their pictures on the missing person report. Amy had her mother's, blonde hair. Jake was missing his front teeth in his school photo. I'll get my gear, I said. While I packed, Marcus told me what they knew. The Brennans were from Pennsylvania, visiting West Virginia for their first camping trip. Tom Brennan had been bragging to other campers about finding a secret valley that wasn't on any maps. They'd left their campground early that morning, heading for what had to be Hunger Hollow. I loaded my backpack with rope, first aid supplies, and emergency food. My father's old compass hung around my neck. It had never let me down. I also slipped my grandmother's small medicine pouch into my pocket, just in case. The drive to the trailhead took an hour on winding mountain roads. The leaves were turning gold and red, but they looked dull somehow, like someone had washed all the brightness out of them. The air smelled wrong too, not like autumn leaves and wood smoke, but something sour and empty. At the trailhead, we found the Brennans' blue station wagon. Their cooler was still in the back seat, untouched. Tom Brennan's wallet was on the dashboard with his driver's license and credit cards. No family leaves their car like that unless something goes very wrong, very fast. State police want to bring in helicopters, Marcus said as we started hiking. But the weather's turning, storm coming in tonight. I looked up at the sky. Heavy gray clouds were building over the peaks. The temperature was dropping fast. It had been 60 degrees that morning, but now I could see my breath. The trail to Hunger Hollow is 6 miles of rough hiking. It starts normal enough, following an old logging road through pine and oak trees. But the deeper you go, the quieter it gets. No birds, no squirrels. Even the insects seem to avoid the place. About halfway there, we found the first sign. Amy's pink hairband caught on a branch beside the trail. It was cleat and bright, like it had just been dropped. "They came this way," Marcus said. I nodded, but something felt wrong. The hairband was too perfect, too obviously placed. Like someone, or something, wanted us to find it. We kept walking. The trail got narrower and steeper. The trees grew closer together, blocking out more and more sunlight. By the time we reached the entrance to Hunger Hollow, it felt like evening, even though my watch said it was only 3 in the afternoon. The hollow opened up in front of us like a wound in the earth. Steep limestone cliffs rose on 3 sides, covered with twisted trees that looked like they were in pain. A narrow creek ran down the middle, making the only sound in the dead silence. And there, beside the creek, was the Brennans' tent. It was still standing, but the sides were flapping in a wind I couldn't feel. Their sleeping bags were spread out like they'd been used. A pot sat on cold ashes where their campfire had been. But no people, no voices, no sign of life at all. Marcus called out, "Hello, Tom! Lisa, this is the sheriff's department." His voice echoed off the cliffs and came back to us changed somehow, hungrier. That's when I noticed my compass. The needle was spinning slowly in circles, like it couldn't find north anymore. I looked at Marcus. He was staring at the tent with a strange expression on his face. "You smell that?" he asked. I did. It smelled like cooking meat, fresh bread, apple pie, all the foods that make your mouth water when you're hungry. But there was no food anywhere. The Brennans' supplies were still packed away. That's when I knew we were in trouble. Real trouble. The smell of food got stronger as we walked toward the tent. My stomach started growling, which was weird because I'd eaten lunch just 2 hours ago. Marcus was walking funny too, like he was trying not to run toward whatever was making that amazing smell. "Tom Brennan," I called out, fighting the urge to follow my nose. "Lisa, kids, can you hear me?" Nothing. Just that echo that sounded too hungry. Inside the tent, everything's. G looked normal at first. 2 adult sleeping bags zipped together, 2 smaller ones for the kids. Tom's glasses were folded neatly on top of a book. Lisa's purse was tucked in the corner with her car keys still inside. But when I looked closer, things got strange. The sleeping bags were arranged perfectly, like a display in a store. No wrinkles, no mess. The kind of neat that happens when someone else sets things up, not when a family with 2 kids makes camp. Marcus found Tom's journal in the tent's front pocket. The last entry was from yesterday morning. Octa 27. Amazing place. Kids love it. Found caves higher up. Local at gas station said nobody ever comes here. Perfect. Elle making her famous camp stew tonight. Jake caught a frog by the creek. Amy collecting pretty rocks. Sounds normal, Marcus said. But his voice was shaky. I pointed to the bottom of the page. There was more writing, but different. The handwriting got sloppy, like someone was writing in the dark or in a hurry. So hungry. Where is everyone? Kids won't stop crying. Food all gone, but we just ate. Was there food? Can't remember. Cave voices calling. Have to find them. So very hungry. That doesn't sound like the same person, I said. Marcus agreed. And look at this. He showed me scratches on the tent's floor. Not cuts from knives or tools, fingernail scratches. Long, desperate gouges like someone was clawing at the ground. That's when we heard it. A child's voice, faint and far away, coming from somewhere up the valley. Mommy? Daddy? I'm hungry. Please. We looked at each other. That had to be one of the Brennan kids. Which direction? Marcus asked. I listened carefully. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The cliffs bounced sound around so much it was impossible to tell where it started. Up there, I said, pointing toward the back of the hollow where I could see dark openings in the cliff face. Caves. But we stick together. No splitting up. The creek was easy to follow at first. Clear mountain water running over smooth rocks. But as we walked deeper, into the hollow, the water got cloudier, thicker. By the time we'd gone a quarter mile, it looked more like soup than stream water. Eleanor, Marcus said quietly, how long has it been since we saw any animals? I'd been thinking the same thing. No birds, no insects. Even the creek didn't have any fish that I could see. In these mountains, that wasn't natural. The child's voice called again. Please, I'm so hungry. Help me. This time, it was definitely coming from the caves ahead. But something about it made my skin crawl. It sounded right, but felt wrong. Like someone doing a really good impression of a scared kid. We reached the first cave opening. It was about 10 feet wide and disappeared into darkness. Cool air drifted out, carrying that food smell again. Stronger now. Beef stew. Fresh cornbread. All the things a hungry person dreams about. My grandmother's voice whispered in my memory. Never trust food that comes from hungry ground. I pulled out my flashlight. The beam seemed weaker than usual, like the darkness was fighting back. Hello? I called into the cave. This is Park Ranger Eleanor Ashworth. Are you in there? The child's voice answered immediately, but now it was coming from deeper in the cave. Help! Please help! We're lost! We're so hungry! Marcus started forward, but I grabbed his arm. Something was wrong. The voice was too clear, too perfect. Real voices get muffled and changed by cave walls. This one sounded like it was being piped through speakers. Wait, I said. Listen. We stood still. The child's voice called again, but this time I heard something else underneath it. A rustling sound, like dry leaves, or like something very thin and papery moving around in the dark. That's when I saw the bones. They were scattered around the cave entrance, mostly covered by fallen leaves. Old bones, yellowed with age. I knelt down and brushed the leaf away from the biggest one. It was a human skull. The jaw was open too wide, like it had been trying to scream when the person died. But what really scared me were the scratches on it. Deep gouges around the mouth and eye sockets. Fingernail scratches, just like the ones in the tent. Marcus, I whispered. We need to call for backup. He tried his radio. Nothing but static. Then he checked his cell phone. No signal. The mountains block everything, he said. But his voice was too high. Scared. That's when we found Tom Brennan. He was sitting against a tree about 50 feet from the cave, facing away from us. He looked normal from behind. Brown hair, blue jacket, hiking boots. He wasn't moving. Tom? I called. Tom Brennan? No answer. We walked around to face him. I wish we hadn't. Tom was still alive, technically. His eyes were open and he was breathing. But he looked like he hadn't eaten in months. His cheeks were sunken in. His skin was pale and waxy. His clothes hung loose on his shrunk body, but the worst part was his hands. His fingertips were bloody and raw, fingernails broken and torn. The tree bark in front of him was stripped away in long scratches, like he'd been trying to eat it. Tom, I said gently, kneeling beside him. Where are Lisa and the kids? He turned his head toward me very slowly. When he spoke, his voice was just a whisper. So hungry. Been so hungry. Had to eat. Had to eat something. anything. His breath smelled like dirt and old leaves. "When did you last eat?" Marcus asked. Tom's eyes got confused. "Eat? We had... Lisa made stew. Yesterday? Today? Was it today? But I'm still hungry. So hungry, it hurts." I checked my first aid kit for energy bars, but when I pulled one out, Tom's eyes went wild. He grabbed for it with those bloody fingers, making a sound that wasn't quite human. The food wrapper crumbled to dust in my hands, like it had. It'd been sitting there for years instead of hours. That's when the child's voice called again, closer now. "Daddy? Daddy, where are you? I found food, real food, come and see." Tom tried to stand up, but he was too weak. "Amy," he whispered. "My little girl found food." But I knew it wasn't Amy. Couldn't be. That voice was coming from somewhere no human child could survive. And Tom Brennan looked like he'd been starving for weeks, not 2 days. I looked at my watch. 4:30 p.m. But the sun was already setting, even though it should have been hours away from dark. "We're leaving," I told Marcus. "Right now." But when we turned around, the way we'd come was different. The creek was flowing uphill. The cave openings had multiplied. There were now 5 or 6 dark holes in the cliff where there had only been one before. And in every cave mouth, yellow eyes were watching us. "Which way did we come from?" Marcus asked. But I could hear the fear in his voice. I spun around looking for landmarks. The creek had definitely been flowing downhill when we followed it up here. Water doesn't flow uphill. It's impossible. But there it was, clear as anything, running upward toward the back of the hollow like it was being sucked into those dark caves. Tom Brennan was trying to crawl toward the nearest cave entrance. "Food," he kept saying. "Smell the food. Just a little bite, please." I grabbed him under the arms and tried to pull him back, but he was surprisingly strong for someone who looked half dead. His fingernails dug into my jacket. "Let me go," he hissed. "The children are calling. They found food." That child's voice came again, but now there were 2 of them, calling from different caves. "Daddy, Mommy, come see. We found so much food." The voices sounded exactly like kids, but they were too cheerful. Kids lost in caves for 2 days would be crying, scared, maybe hurt. These voices sounded happy, excited, like they were playing a game. Marcus had his gun out. "Eleanor, those aren't the Brennan kids." I knew he was right, but hearing it said out loud made my legs feel weak. If those weren't Amy and Jake calling to us, then where were the real children? The yellow eyes in the cave mouths were getting brighter. Not glowing exactly, but easier to see as the light faded. And there were more of them now. Dozens of pairs, watching us from every shadow. "We need to get out of here," I said. "Help me with Tom." But Tom wouldn't come. He bit my hand when I tried to lift him, drawing blood. His teeth felt too sharp. "Leave me," he whispered. "I need to find my family. They're hungry. We're all so hungry." The smell of food was getting stronger. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, apple pie cooling on a windowsill. All the comfort foods that make you feel safe and loved. My stomach cramped with sudden, fierce hunger. I hadn't felt hungry at all 10 minutes ago, but now I was starving. When was the last time I ate? This morning? Yesterday? I couldn't remember. Marcus was looking around wildly. "You smell that? God, when did we last eat?" The child voices were getting closer. "Food! Food! Come and eat with us!" And then I saw them. 2 small figures standing at the mouth of the biggest cave. They looked like Amy and Jake Brennan from a distance. The right size, the right hair colors. But something was wrong with the way they stood. Too still. Too perfect. "Amy?" Tom called weakly. "Jake?" The figures waved at us. "Daddy! We found the best food! Come see!" They turned and walked into the cave, but they moved wrong. Too smooth. Like they were floating just above the ground. Tom started crawling faster toward the cave. I had to let him go, or he would have dragged me with him. "We have to follow," Marcus said. His voice sounded strange, hungry. The kids need help. Marcus, no. I grabbed his arm. Those aren't the real children. But he was staring at the cave mouth with that same wild look Tom had. I'm so hungry, Eleanor. When did we last eat? Can't remember eating anything today. I could feel it too. The hunger was growing in my stomach like a living thing, clawing at my insides. But something my grandmother taught me helped me. Fight it. I pulled her medicine pouch from my pocket and held it tight. The hunger faded a little. Not gone, but manageable. It's not real, I told Marcus. The hunger isn't real. Something's making us feel this way. He blinked, looking confused. But I'm starving. We need to find food. Tom had reached the cave entrance. The fake children were waiting for him, holding out their hands. Come on, Daddy. Just a little further. When Tom reached for them, they backed deeper into the cave, always just out of reach. That's when I heard Lisa. Tom? Tom, where are you? Her voice came from behind us. I spun around and saw her walking toward us from the direction we'd come. But like her husband, she looked terrible. Thin as a skeleton, clothes hanging off her like rags. She was carrying something in her hands. Lisa, Marcus called. Thank God. Where are the kids? She got closer, and I could see what she was carrying. It was a plate of food. Fried chicken, green beans, cornbread. It looked perfect, hot, fresh. But Lisa's eyes were empty, hungry, like she was looking right through us. I found food, she said in a flat voice. Good food. Want some? She held out the plate. The smell made my mouth water and my stomach cramp with need. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until I saw that chicken, crispy and golden brown. Marcus reached for it. God, yes, I'm starving. I knocked his hand away. No! The moment I touched the plate, it crumbled to dust. Just like Tom's energy bar. Lisa's face twisted with rage. You ruined it, she screamed. You ruined the food! Now we'll starve! Now we'll all starve! She lunged at me with her fingernails, trying to claw my face, but her hands passed right through me like I was made of air. That's when I understood. Lisa Brennan was dead. Had been dead for at least a day. Whatever was in that hollow was using her body like a puppet. The fake sea. Hildren's voices got louder. Mommy! Daddy! Food! Food! Tom disappeared into the cave, following the things that looked like his kids. Lisa's body collapsed like a marionette with cut strings. But as she fell, something else stood up from where she'd been. Something tall and thin and wrong. It looked almost human, but stretched out like taffy. 7 feet tall, but no thicker than a broomstick. Its arms hung down to the ground, ending in fingers like twigs. Its face was mostly mouth, a huge, gaping hole lined with yellowed teeth. And it was hungry. I could feel its hunger like heat from a fire. Feed, it whispered in Lisa's voice. So hungry. Need to feed. More of them stepped out of the shadows. Thin, stretched-out things with too many teeth and empty eye sockets. All of them whispering, hungry, hungry, feed us. Marcus raised his gun, but his hands were shaking. What are they? The deserters, I said, finally understanding. The Confederate soldiers who starved here. They're still hungry. The things circled us, getting closer. Their whispers filled the air. Feed, feed. So hungry, always hungry. I pulled out my father's compass. The needle was spinning wildly, but something else was happening. The Cherokee symbols my grandmother had carved around the edge were starting to glow with a faint blue light. The hunger ghosts hissed and stepped back. This way, I said, grabbing Marcus's arm. Stay close to me. We ran. Behind us, the hungry voices rose to a howl of rage and need. The sound echoed off the cliffs until it seemed like the whole hollow was screaming. As we ran, I could hear Tom's voice from somewhere deep in the caves. Amy! Jake! Wait for Daddy! I'm coming! And then his screaming started. But we couldn't help him now. We had to get out of that valley before the things caught us, if we could find the way out at all. We ran through the twisted hollow at Zerdosum. Darkness fell around us like a heavy blanket. Behind us, the hunger ghosts howled and followed. I could hear them moving through the trees. that dry, rustling sound like old newspapers, blowing in the wind. Marcus was breathing hard. "The trail!" he gasped. "Where's the trail?" That was the problem. There was no trail anymore. The ground kept shifting under our feet. Paths appeared and disappeared. Creek beds wound in circles. It was like the hollow was rearranging itself to keep us trapped. My grandmother's compass was the only thing that stayed constant. The blue glow around its edges got brighter whenever we headed in the right direction. "This way," I said, following the light. We stumbled through the dark for what felt like hours. The hunger was getting worse. It felt like my stomach was eating itself from the inside. Marcus kept stopping to pick up rocks and sticks, looking at them like they might be food. "Eleanor," he said in a weak voice, "I found something." He was holding up what looked like a candy bar. Perfect wrapper, bright colors, completely out of place in the middle of the wilderness. "Don't touch it," I said. But I wanted to. God, I wanted that candy bar more than I'd ever wanted anything in my life. Marcus unwrapped it. Inside was something brown and sweet-looking. He raised it to his mouth. "Marcus, no!" I tackled him, knocking the candy bar from his hands. It hit the ground and turned into a pile of mud and dead leaves. He stared at it, confused. "But I'm so hungry. We haven't eaten in days." "We ate this morning," I said. But even as I said it, I wondered if it was true. When had I last eaten? My memories felt fuzzy, like looking through dirty glass. That's when I heard my brother's voice. "Ellie? Ellie, is that you?" I went cold. My brother Danny had been dead for 10 years. Died in a cave-in when he was exploring the old mines. At least, that's what I'd always believed. "Ellie, I'm hungry. I've been hungry for so long. Please help me." The voice was coming from up ahead, where my compass light was pointing. Right where we need, dead to go to escape. "Who is that?" Marcus asked. "My brother," I whispered. "But he's dead. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's been trapped down here all this time." I wanted to believe it. Danny had been my best friend when we were kids. I'd blamed myself for his death. I was supposed to meet him that day, but got scared and stayed home. Maybe if I'd been with him, I could have saved him. "Ellie, please. I found food. Real food. Come and see." My feet started moving toward the voice without permission. But something stopped me. The memory of my grandmother's words. "The hungry dead lie best when they speak with the voices we want to hear most." I forced myself to stop. It's not him. It can't be him. But Marcus was already walking toward the voice. "Danny? It's Marcus Greenberg, Eleanor's friend. Where are you?" "Here! I'm right here. I have food for both of you." A figure stepped out of the shadows ahead. It looked exactly like my brother. Sandy hair, crooked smile, wearing the same clothes he'd died in. But his eyes were empty holes and his mouth was too wide. "I've been waiting for you, Ellie," it said in Danny's voice. "I saved you some supper." It held out a plate of food, all my favorites from when I was a kid. Mom's meatloaf, mashed potatoes with butter, green beans from the garden. My hand reached for the plate automatically. "No!" I screamed, fighting against my own hunger. I grabbed my grandmother's medicine pouch and held it up. The fake Danny hissed and stepped back. "Don't you want to see me, Ellie? I missed you so much. I've been hungry for so long." "You're not my brother," I said. Tears were running down my face, but I kept the medicine pouch raised. "Danny's at peace. He's not hungry anymore." The thing wearing Danny's face smiled with too many teeth. "But you're hungry, aren't you? So very hungry. Join us, and the hunger stops forever." Morphoid, Igeres stepped out of the shadows. All the people who had died in this hollow over the years. The Cherokee buried here. The 30 Confederate deserters, Tom and Lisa Brennan. All of them, carrying plates of perfect food. "Join us," they whispered together. "Feed with us. Never be hungry again." The smell of all that food made me dizzy. Roast beef, apple pie, fresh bread. Everything I'd ever loved to eat, all offered at once. Marcus was walking toward them. "Yes," he said. "I'm so hungry." I grabbed his hand and pressed my grandmother's medicine pouch against his palm. The blue light flared, and Marcus shook his head like he was waking up. "What? Where are we?" The hunger ghosts hissed and moved closer. There were dozens of them now, surrounding us in a circle of empty eyes and gaping mouths. "Feed," they whispered. "Feed, feed, feed." That's when I heard the real children. Faint voices from somewhere underground. Scared, weak, but alive. "Help us," Amy Brennan's voice drifted up from beneath our feet. "Please help us. We're so hungry." I looked down. We were standing on a grate made of old iron bars. Below it was a natural pit in the limestone, maybe 12 feet deep. At the bottom I could see two small figures huddled together, the real Amy and Jake Brennan, alive, but barely. They're bait, I realized. The hungry things keep them alive to draw people down here. The hunger ghosts pressed closer. "Feed," they whispered. "Join us. Never hunger again." My grandmother's compass was burning bright blue now. But the light was getting weaker as my strength faded. I was so hungry I could barely stand. Then I remembered something else my grandmother had taught me. A Cherokee prayer for cleansing cursed ground. Words in a language the settlers and soldiers had never learned to twist. I started chanting in Cherokee, my voice getting stronger with each word. The medicine pouch grew hot in my hand, then blazing bright. The hunger ghosts screamed and fell back. Their false bodies started dissolving like smoke, but their hunger remained. I could feel it pressing against me like a living thing trying to get inside my head, my heart, my stomach. "You cannot cast us out," the thing wearing Danny's face said. "This is our place. We died here hungry. We will always be hungry." "Then I'll feed you," I said. I pulled out my emergency flare and cracked it open. Bright red light flooded the hollow. The hunger ghosts screamed and writhed, but they didn't disappear. "Not light," I said, understanding at last. "Food. You need to be fed." I took my grandmother's medicine pouch and poured its contents on the ground. Sage, sweetgrass, corn pollen, all the sacred foods of my grandmother's people. "I give you this," I said in Cherokee. "Food for the hungry dead. Take it and be at peace." The hunger ghosts stopped moving. Their empty eyes focused on the sacred food. "Real food," one whispered. "Food that doesn't turn to dust." They fell on the offering like starving animals. As they ate, their twisted forms began to change. The fake Danny became my real brother for a moment, smiling and whole. "Thank you, Ellie," he said. "I can rest now." One by one, the hunger ghosts faded away, their endless hunger finally satisfied. The iron grate under our feet rusted apart, letting us drop down to the children. Amy and Jake Brennan were unconscious but alive, thin and dehydrated, but breathing. As I lifted Amy into my arms, the hollow began to change around us. The twisted paths straightened out. The uphill creek turned around and flowed downhill again. The curse was broken. The hungry dead were at peace. But our troubles weren't over yet. Getting out of the hollow took 3 hours. Amy and Jake were too weak to walk, so Marcus and I had to carry them. By the time we reached the trailhead, both kids were awake and asking for their parents. I didn't know how to tell them the truth. The ambulance was waiting for us, along with half the county sheriff's department. The state police had helicopters searching the mountains. When they saw us coming out of the trees with the children, everyone started asking questions at once. "Where are Tom and Lisa Brennan? What happened up there? Why didn't you answer your radio calls?" I looked at Marcus. His face was pale and confused. "I don't remember much," he said quietly. "Just being really hungry and voices in the dark." That's what we told everyone. Partial memory loss from hypothermia and dehydration. The official report said Tom and Lisa Brennan had fallen into an underground river system and their bodies were swept away. Case closed. But I knew the truth. And 3 days later, when the county decided to seal off Hunger Hollow with concrete barriers and warning signs, I didn't object. Amy and Jake recovered in the hospital. They didn't remember much either, just being very hungry and hearing their parents calling to them from somewhere they couldn't reach. The state found relatives in Ohio to take them in. I never saw Marcus again after that night. He requested a transfer to another county, said the mountains felt different now, dangerous. I understood. The hollow is quiet now. The Cherokee spirits are at rest, and the Confederate ghosts have finally been fed. But sometimes, late at night when I'm patrolling the park boundaries, I can still smell cooking food drifting down from those sealed-off cliffs, and I'm always careful to eat regular meals, because I learned something important in that hungry place. We're all just a few missed meals away from desperation, just a few days of hunger away from doing things we never thought we could do. The hunger is always waiting, in all of us. I still work as a park ranger, but I've been promoted to district supervisor now. Part of my job is keeping people away from dangerous areas. When hikers ask about the sealed trails leading toward the old hollow, I tell them those paths are closed due to unstable geology, which is true in a way. Last month, a mining company applied for permits to explore the area around Hollow. Something about rare earth minerals in the limestone formations. I made sure their application got lost in paperwork. Some places should stay buried, but I know it won't stay quiet forever. There are other hollows in these mountains, other places where people died hungry and angry, and there are always companies willing to dig up the past for profit. When that day comes, I'll be ready. My grandmother's medicine pouch hangs around my neck now, next to my father's compass. And I've been learning more Cherokee prayers from the tribal elders. Because the mountains keep their secrets, but they don't keep them forever. And when the hungry dead wake up again, someone needs to know how to feed them properly. Someone needs to remember that the land has a long memory and an even longer appetite. My name is Catherine Ravenshollow, but everyone calls me Cat. I write about haunted places for a living, and I don't believe in ghosts. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. I've spent 5 years visiting every supposedly haunted hotel, battlefield, and cemetery from Maine to Georgia. I take photos, interview locals, and write guidebooks for people who love a good ghost story. The thing is, I've never seen anything that couldn't be explained by creaky old buildings, overactive imaginations, or tourism money. That's what made me perfect for this job. My publisher wanted someone who could write about spooky places without getting caught up in the nonsense. Give them chills, but keep it real, he always said. So when I got the assignment to cover Devil's Staircase in Virginia, I wasn't worried. It was just another scenic overlook with a creepy name. I'd driven 4 hours from Richmond, winding up into the Blue Ridge Mountains on a cold October morning. The trees were brilliant orange and red, like the whole mountainside was on fire. The parking area sat about a quarter mile from the actual rock formation. A wooden sign warned visitors to stay on marked paths and watch their footing. Nothing unusual there. Every scenic spot had signs like that. What caught my attention was the park ranger standing next to a patrol truck, watching each car that pulled in. His name was Luke Hartwood, according to his badge. Tall, probably my age, with kind eyes and work-rough hands. When I introduced myself as a travel writer, his expression changed. "You're here about the Devil's Staircase?" he asked. "That's right. I'm working on a book about haunted tourist spots. What can you tell me about the local legends?" Luke glanced around, then stepped closer. "Look, I probably shouldn't say this, but maybe you should write about somewhere else." "Why's that?" "We've had 3 suicides up here in the past 6 months. And I mean people who came here happy, took some photos, then just jumped. No warning, no history of depression. Nothing." I pulled out my notebook. This was exactly the kind of local color that sold books. "Has anyone investigated? Police? State authorities?" "Officially, they're calling them isolated incidents. Stress, personal problems, that sort of thing." Luke kicked at the gravel. "But I've been working these mountains for 8 years. I've never seen anything like it. Mind if I take a look around?" Luke studied my face for a long moment. "Be careful up there, and don't go alone." The walk to Devil's Staircase took about 10 minutes through thick woods. The path was well maintained but narrow, with drop-offs on both sides once you got near the formation. I could hear water running somewhere below, probably underground streams. Then I saw it. Devil's Staircase looked exactly like its name, a series of flat stone ledges that stepped up the mountainside like stairs built for giants. Each step was maybe 8 feet wide and 3 feet tall. You could walk up them easily, right to the very top where the final ledge hung out over empty air. The view was incredible. The valley spread out 1,200 feet below, covered in autumn colors that seemed to glow in the morning sun. I could see why people came here. It was beautiful. It was also completely silent. I'd been hiking in mountains before, and there was always sound. Birds, insects, wind in the trees. Here, nothing. Even my footsteps seemed muffled. I took some photos with my digital camera, but they all came out strangely dark, like the light wasn't quite right. That's when I noticed the ravens. There had to be 50 of them, perched in the dead trees that grew from cracks in the rock. They weren't making any noise, just watching. When I moved, their heads turned to follow me, and when I stopped, they stared. I'd never seen ravens act like that before. As I climbed the stone steps, the temperature dropped noticeably. My breath started showing in small puffs. The rock felt wrong under my feet. Not slippery exactly, but unstable, like it might shift at any moment. On the third step, I found something carved into the stone. It was old, worn, almost smooth, but I could make out letters. Walker Family, 1953. Below that, someone had scratched "Together Forever." I took a photo of the carving, and that's when my camera started acting up. The display flickered, showing double images, then went completely black for several seconds. When it came back on, there was a photo in the memory that I hadn't taken. It showed the valley below, but somehow the colors were all wrong. Instead of brilliant fall colors, everything looked gray and dead. And there were shapes in the photo that looked like people falling through the air. I deleted the photo immediately. By the time I made it back to the parking area, Luke was gone. But there was a note tucked under my windshield wiper. Ask Preacher Josiah about the Walkers. He lives in the White House past the general store. And Kat, don't come back here alone. How did he know my nickname? I found Preacher Josiah's house just as Luke described, a small white cottage behind Thompson's general store in the valley. The old man who answered the door looked like he'd stepped out of a different century. Long white beard, simple clothes, eyes that seemed to see too much. "You're the writer," he said before I could introduce myself. Luke called, said you were asking about Devil's Staircase. That's right, I'm researching local legends for a travel book. Ain't no legend about that place. Josiah stepped onto his porch and closed the door behind him. Mind if we talk out here? Some things don't belong inside a house. I pulled out my notebook, but Josiah shook his head. Put that away. This ain't for writing down. He told me about the Walker family. In 1953, Robert Walker brought his wife and 2 young children to Devil's Staircase for a family photo. They were from Richmond, just like me. Happy family, good people, no problems anyone knew about. Ranger found them the next morning, Josiah said. All 4 of them at the bottom of the valley. Looked like they'd jumped together, holding hands. Murder-suicide? That's what the papers said, but Robert Walker was a deacon in his church. Mary Walker taught Sunday school. Those babies were 6 and 8 years old. Josiah's voice got quiet. People don't just decide to kill their whole family for no reason. Then what do you think happened? I think something up there called to them, something that feeds on despair. Josiah fixed me with those sharp eyes. Same thing that's been calling to people ever since. I wanted to laugh, but something in his tone stopped me. You mean the suicides Luke mentioned? 3 in 6 months. Before that, maybe 1 every couple years. But it's getting stronger. What's getting stronger? Instead of answering, Josiah asked, You lose someone close to you, Miss Cat? The question hit me like a punch. I hadn't told anyone in Virginia about Emma. I never talked about Emma. How did you? It's written all over you. Guilt, grief, self-blame. Josiah leaned forward. That thing up there, it can smell that on a person, and it uses it. I stood up abruptly. I think we're done here. Your sister, Josiah called as I walked away. She jumped too, didn't she? I stopped walking. 2 years ago, he continued. Maybe 3. Bridge or building, somewhere high. And you think it's your fault. I turned around slowly. How could you possibly know that? Because you got the mark on you, same as all the others who come to Devil's Staircase. The ones who are already broken inside. Josiah stood up. That's what it feeds on. People who are already hurting. Makes them hurt worse until there's only no way out. Emma had jumped from the Jefferson Memorial Bridge on a Tuesday morning in March. She was 25, beautiful, had everything to live for. The note she left just said, "I'm sorry." No explanation. No goodbye. No reason why my little sister decided she didn't want to be alive anymore. Miss Cat, Josiah said gently, you planning to go back up there? I nodded. Then you better understand what you're dealing with. It ain't just local folklore. It's something real, and it's hungry. I drove back to Devil's Staircase that evening, even though I'd promised Luke I wouldn't go alone. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the rock formation. The ravens were still there, but now they were making noise, harsh cries that echoed off the stone. I wanted to take some photos in the twilight, get that atmospheric lighting that made guidebooks sell. But as I climbed the stone steps, my camera started acting up again. The flash fired randomly. The display showed images that weren't there. On the 4th step, I heard something. It was very faint at first, like wind through the trees, or maybe water running over rocks. But as I listened closer, it started to sound like voices, whispers, too distant to understand. I stopped climbing and listened. The whispers were coming from below, from the valley where the Walker family had fallen. Multiple voices, overlapping, all saying different things. But I could make out one word that kept repeating, "Come." I raised my camera to take a photo of the valley, and that's when I saw them. In the viewfinder, there were people standing on the rocks below. Dozens of them, maybe more. They were all looking up at me, and they were all waving, beckoning me to come down. When I lowered the camera, the valley was empty. I took the photo anyway. When I checked the display, the people were there in the image. Translucent figures scattered across the rocks, all with their arms raised toward me. At the front of the group, I could see a family of 4 holding hands. Cat. I spun around. No one was there. Cat, come down here. The voice was clearer now and familiar. It sounded exactly like Emma. Emma? I called out. I'm down here, Cat. Come see me. I walked to the edge of the final stone step and looked over. The valley floor was lost in shadow now, but I could see a figure standing in a patch of moonlight. A young woman with long dark hair, wearing the blue dress Emma had been buried in. I've been waiting for you, she said, and her voice carried impossibly well across the distance. It's beautiful down here. Peaceful. No more pain. I knew it wasn't really Emma. I knew it was impossible. But God help me, I wanted it to be her. Come down, Cat. It's so easy. Just one step. I found myself walking forward right to the very edge of the rock. One more step, and I'd be falling, just like the walkers, just like Emma. That's right, Emma's voice said. Just let go. My foot was already moving when my phone rang. The sound broke whatever spell had been building. I stumbled backward, away from the edge, and fumbled for my phone. It was Luke. Cat, are you okay? I've been worried about you. I looked around. The valley was completely dark now. No figures, no voices, just silence and shadows. I'm fine. I was just taking some photos. Please tell me you're not up there alone. I lied and said I wasn't. That night, in my motel room in the valley, I couldn't stop looking at the photos on my camera. The images from the twilight shoot showed the valley as empty and normal. But that one photo from earlier, the one with all the figures, they were still there. And now I could see more details. The family of 4 in front weren't just any family. They matched the description Josiah had given me of the walkers. Behind them, dozens of other figures, all with the same expression of peace and invitation. And at the very back, barely visible, was a young woman in a séqueuse, blue dress. Emma. I should have left Virginia that night. Instead, I found myself at the diner in town the next morning, drinking coffee and staring at my camera. Every few minutes, I'd check that photo again. The figures were still there, and they seemed to be getting clearer. You look like you've seen a ghost. I looked up to find an elderly Native American woman standing by my table. She was small and weathered, with silver hair and long braids and eyes that reminded me of Josiah's, like they saw more than they should. I'm Mary Spirit Bear, she said. Mind if I sit? I gestured to the empty chair. How did you know who I was? Word travels fast in a small town. You're the writer asking questions about the staircase. Mary poured herself coffee from my pot without asking. Josiah told me about your conversation. Then you know I'm not much of a believer in this stuff. Belief don't matter much to the spirits up there. They're real, whether you believe or not. Mary studied my face. Question is, are you strong enough to fight them? Fight what exactly? The Cherokee called that place Steps of Sorrow. Long time ago, when my people had to choose between slavery and death, some chose death. They went up there to meet the Great Spirit on their own terms. Mary's voice got quiet. But something went wrong. Instead of crossing over to the spirit world, they got trapped. Hungry. Angry. Josiah said it feeds on despair. Despair, guilt, grief, any kind of spiritual wound. It calls to people who are already broken inside, makes them think death is better than healing. Mary reached across the table and touched my hand. Your sister. She was called too, wasn't she? I pulled my hand back. Emma killed herself at home, in Richmond. She never came here. Don't matter where she was. The calling can reach anywhere, to anyone who's vulnerable. But the staircase is where it's strongest. That's impossible. Mary shrugged. Lot of impossible things in this world. Doesn't make them less real. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, Can I see your photos? I hesitated, then handed over my camera. Mary scrolled through the images, pausing at the one with all the figures. Her expression grew serious. This is bad. Very bad. She looked at me sharply. How many times you been up there? Twice. And you heard voices both times? I nodded. It's already marked you. That's why you can see them in the photo. You're starting to cross over into their world. Mary handed back my camera. You need to leave. Today. I can't. I have a job to finish. Your job ain't worth your life. But I was already thinking about Emma's voice calling to me from the valley. Part of me wanted to hear it again, even knowing it wasn't really her. The rational part of my mind said Mary was just a superstitious old woman, that I was letting local folklore get to me. The part that had heard Emma's voice last night said otherwise. I went back to Devil's Staircase that afternoon, telling myself I just needed a few more photos to complete my research. Luke wasn't at the parking area this time, which was probably for the best. I didn't want to explain why I kept coming back. The walk through the woods felt different in daylight. The shadows were wrong somehow, falling in directions that didn't match the sun's position. And there were more ravens, hundreds of them now, covering every tree branch. When I passed underneath, they all turned to watch me at once. The silence was deeper than before. Even my heartbeat seemed muffled. When I reached the stone steps, I saw that someone had been leaving flowers. Fresh ones, scattered across the first few ledges. Roses, lilies, baby's breath, funeral flowers. But there was no memorial plaque, no sign saying who they were for. I started climbing anyway. On the third step, where the Walker family carving was, someone had left a child's toy, a small stuffed rabbit, well worn and obviously loved. I picked it up without thinking. The moment my fingers touched the fabric, I was somewhere else. I was standing on the same stone step, but it was 1953. A family was climbing ahead of me. Mother, father, 2 children. The little girl was carrying the stuffed rabbit I now held. They were laughing, taking photos, having a wonderful day. Then they reached the top step, and their expressions changed. The father's smile faded. The mother stopped mid-sentence. The children moved closer together, suddenly frightened. They all turned to look down into the valley, and I followed their gaze. Something was down there. Not Emma this time, but dozens of figures in the shadows, all calling silently for the family to come down, to jump, to join them in the peaceful darkness below. "It's okay," the father said, but his voice sounded dreamy, distant. "We'll be together, forever." The mother nodded, taking her children's hands. No more pain, no more fear. They walked to the edge together and jumped. I blinked, and I was back in 2025. The stuffed rabbit was gone from my hands, but I could smell roses, funeral flowers, wilted and rotting. "You saw them." I spun around. Luke was standing behind me, but something was wrong with his face. His skin was gray, his eyes were clouded over, and when he spoke, I could see through him to the trees beyond. "You saw how peaceful it was," he said. "How easy." "Luke?" My voice came out as a whisper. "I've been waiting for you, Kat. We all have." He gestured toward the valley, and I saw them. Hundreds of figures now, all transparent, all beckoning. "Your sister's down there. She wants you to come home." I backed away from him. "You're not real." "Real enough." Luke Thing smiled, showing teeth that were too sharp. "Real as the pain you carry. Real as the guilt. Real as the voice that tells you it should have been you instead of Emma." "Stop." "She called you that night, didn't she? Called to say goodbye? But you didn't answer. You were angry about some stupid fight you'd had. So she died alone, thinking you hated her." "Stop!" I screamed. But the loose, Key Thing kept talking, and every word was true. "If you'd answered, you could have talked her out of it, saved her. But you were too proud, too stubborn. So now she's gone, and it's all your fault." I was crying now, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. Because he was right. Emma had called that night, and I'd let it go to voicemail. By the time I listened to the message, just her voice saying, "I love you, Kat," she was already gone. "But you can fix it," the Luke Thing said gently. "You can be with her again. All you have to do is step off the edge. One step, and all the pain goes away." I found myself walking forward, toward the final ledge. The voices from the valley were getting louder now, and I could hear Emma clearly among them. "Come on, Kat," she was saying. "I forgive you. Just come down here and everything will be okay." My foot was at the very edge of the rock when I heard a new voice. "Catherine, get away from there!" It was Mary Spirit Bear, climbing up the stone steps behind me. She was chanting something in Cherokee, holding a bundle of burning herbs. The Luke Thing hissed and stepped backward. "Fight it," Mary shouted. "It's not your sister. Emma's at peace. This thing is just using her memory." The figures in the valley were getting agitated now, their beckoning becoming more urgent. The Luke Thing was starting to fade, its false friendly expression melting into something hungry and hateful. "You can't have her," Mary continued chanting, and the smell of sage smoke filled the air. "She belongs to the living world." The spirit Luke gave a shriek of rage and vanished entirely. The voices from the valley faded to whispers, then silence. Mary grabbed my arm and pulled me away from the edge. "We need to leave. Now." But as we climbed down the stone steps, I could feel something watching us. When I looked back, every one of those hundreds of ravens had turned to stare at me with eyes that glowed like dying coals. This wasn't over. Mary took me back to her house, a small cabin on the reservation about 20 miles from Devil's Staircase. The walls were covered with dream catchers, medicine wheels, and old photographs of Cherokee families. She made me tea that tasted like pine needles and earth. "Tell me about your sister," she said. I'd never talked about Emma's death with anyone. Not family, not friends, not even a therapist. But sitting in Mary's kitchen, with sage smoke still clinging to my clothes, the story came pouring out. Emma had been struggling with depression for months before she died. She'd lost her job, broken up with her boyfriend, and was living in my spare room while she tried to get back on her feet. We'd been fighting a lot, about money, about her future, about the way she stayed in bed all day and wouldn't even try to get help. The night she died, we'd had our worst fight yet. She'd asked to borrow money for therapy, and I'd exploded. Told her she needed to stop making excuses and take responsibility for her own life. She'd called me later that night, but I was still angry. I let it go to voicemail. "I love you, Kat," the message said. "I'm sorry for everything. I hope someday you'll understand." She jumped from the Jefferson Memorial Bridge at 3 a.m. The police said she died instantly. "And you've been carrying that guilt ever since," Mary said when I finished. I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. That thing at the staircase, it feeds on exactly that kind of pain. Guilt, shame, regret. It draws spirits like that from all over. Your sister's death called to it, and now it's using her memory to call to you. But I saw her. I heard her voice. You saw what it wanted you to see. A trick using your love for her against you. Mary reached across the table and took my hands. Your sister's spirit ain't trapped at Devil's Staircase, child. She's at peace. What you're hearing is just an echo, twisted by something that wants to add you to its collection. So, what do I do? Mary was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "We're going to have to go back up there." "What? No, absolutely not." "It's marked you now. Won't matter how far you run. It'll keep calling until you answer. Only way to break free is to face it directly, on its own ground." Mary stood up and started gathering items from around the kitchen. More sage, some crystals, a pouch of tobacco. "But this time, you'll be protected." I don't understand why this is happening to me. I don't even believe in... Belief ain't the point, Mary interrupted. Pain is the point. You got a wound in your spirit, and that thing can smell it. Until you heal that wound, you'll never be free. We drove back to Devil's Staircase just as the sun was setting. This time there were other cars in the parking area, a young couple taking selfies, an older man with expensive camera equipment, normal tourists enjoying the scenery. "We need to get them out of here," Mary said. "Why?" "Because when we confront that thing, it's going to get angry. And angry spirits don't much care who gets hurt." Mary walked over to the couple and said something I couldn't hear. Whatever it was, it made them pack up their cameras and leave immediately. She did the same with the older man. Within minutes, we were alone in the parking area. "How did you do that?" "Told them the truth. Said the place was dangerous tonight." Mary pulled her bundle of supplies from the car. Most people can sense spiritual danger, even if they don't understand what they're feeling. The walk to the stone formation felt like walking underwater. The air was thick, oppressive, and every step was harder than the last. The ravens were waiting for us, more than I'd ever seen before. They covered every tree, every rock, every surface that could hold them, thousands of black bodies with gleaming eyes. When we reached the first stone step, Mary stopped. "This is where I leave you," she said. "What? You said you'd help me." "I am helping, but the confrontation has to be yours. That thing is connected to your guilt, your pain. I can protect you, but I can't fight it for you." Mary handed me the sage bundle. "Keep this burning. It'll weaken the spirit's hold on this place." "I don't know how to do this." "Yes, you do. You've been fighting this guilt for 2 years. Time to finish the fight." I climbed the stone steps alone, the sage bundle smoking in my hand. With each step, the air got colder and the voices got louder. By the time I reached the third step, where the Walker family carving was, I could hear dozens of spirits whispering my name. On the fourth step, Emma appeared. She looked exactly like she had in life. 25, beautiful, with a smile that had always made everything better. She was wearing jeans and my old college sweatshirt, not the blue funeral dress I'd seen before. "Kat," she said, and her voice was warm and real and heartbreaking. "I've been waiting so long to see you." "You're not Emma." "Of course I am. Who else would I be?" She stepped closer, and I could smell her perfume. the same vanilla scent she'd worn since high school. "I know you blame yourself for what happened, but it wasn't your fault. I was sick, and I made a choice. You couldn't have stopped me." This was different from before. The spirit Emma wasn't trying to lure me to jump. She was offering forgiveness, understanding, peace. It was everything I'd wanted to hear for 2 years. "It wasn't your fault," she repeated, "but you can still join me. We can be together again, and you'll never have to feel guilty anymore." "That's not how healing works," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "Healing means living with the pain, not running from it." Emma's expression flickered just for a second. "But this way is so much easier." "Easy isn't the same as right." "Kat, please. I'm lonely here. I need you with me." And that's when I knew for certain it wasn't really Emma. My sister had never been selfish, never would have asked me to die just to keep her company. She'd want me to live, to be happy, to find a way to carry on without her. "You're not my sister," I said firmly. "Emma would never ask me to give up my life." The thing wearing Emma's face snarled, and its beautiful features melted away like wax. What stood in front of me now was something ancient and hungry, with too many teeth and eyes like dying stars. "You cannot resist forever," it hissed. "The guilt will eat you alive. You will come to us eventually. Maybe, but not today." I raised the burning sage bundle and the creature shrieked. All around the stone formation the ravens took flight at once, filling the air with black wings and harsh cries. The temperature plummeted, and frost began forming on the rocks. "You killed her just as surely as if you pushed her yourself," the creature screamed. "She called for help and you ignored her. She died because of you." "She died because she was in pain," I said, tears streaming down my face. "She died because depression is a disease, and sometimes people don't recover. It wasn't my fault, and it wasn't hers either." The creature was getting smaller, less solid. "You don't believe that. I'm learning to believe it, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life helping other people believe it too." With a final shriek of rage, the creature dissolved into smoke and shadow. The voices from the valley went silent. The ravens settled back into the trees, just ordinary birds again. I stood there for a long time, letting the tears come, grieving not just for Emma, but for the 2 years I'd spent hating myself for her death. The guilt would probably never completely go away, but it didn't have to control me anymore. When I finally walked back down the stone steps, Mary was waiting at the bottom. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Tired, sad, but lighter somehow." Mary smiled. "That's healing starting. Won't happen overnight, but you made a good beginning tonight." "What happens to the others? The spirits trapped here?" "They'll be back. That thing has been feeding here for decades. It'll take more than one confrontation to destroy it completely." Mary looked up at the stone formation, now peaceful in the moonlight. "But you weakened it tonight, made it harder for it to call to others. Will it come after me again?" "No. You're not prey anymore. You're a survivor." I never did write that supernatural tourism guidebook. Instead, I called my publisher the next morning and told him I wanted to do something different, something that might actually help people instead of just entertaining them. 6 months later, my book, Walking Away from the Edge, A Guide to Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Resources, was published. It included Emma's story, my own struggle with survivor's guilt, and interviews with dozens of families affected by suicide. It also included a chapter about places like Devil's Staircase, scenic overlooks, and bridges that seem to call to people in crisis. Luke and I kept in touch. The Park Service eventually closed public access to Devil's Staircase after 2 more attempted suicides, both of which Luke was able to prevent. He said the spirits were quieter now, less active, but still there, waiting. Mary Spirit Bear became one of my closest friends. She taught me more about spiritual healing and the importance of confronting pain rather than running from it. She also helped me understand that some battles against darkness are never completely won. They just have to be fought over and over again. I still think about Emma every day. I still wish I'd answered that phone call. But I've learned to carry the grief without letting it carry me. The difference between mourning and being consumed by guilt is the difference between honoring the dead and joining them. 3 years after that night at Devil's Staircase, I got a call from a park ranger in Colorado. They had a bridge where people kept jumping, and they'd heard about my work with suicide prevention. Would I be willing to come take a look? I said yes, because some of us are called to face the darkness, not to join it, but to help others find their way back to the light. It's dangerous work, and it's never finished. There will always be places like Devil's Staircase where ancient hungers prey on human despair, but there will also always be people willing to stand against them. I'm one of those people now. It's the least I can do for Emma's memory. And sometimes, late at night when I'm working on a particularly difficult case, I swear I can hear her voice, not calling me to join her, but encouraging me to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep choosing life over the easy darkness. That's how I know she's really at peace. The real Emma would never ask me to give up. She'd want me to live. End of story. My name is Sam Ironheart, and I need to tell you what happened in Blackwater Mine 7 back in 1987. People say I'm crazy, that the black lung got to my brain, but I know what I saw down there. I know what's still watching from the tunnels. I was 28 then, working as a mine safety inspector for Holloway Mining Company. Sounds fancy, but it just meant I crawled through dark holes all day, checking if the ceiling was going to fall on somebody's head. My daddy, Ezra, had been digging coal from that same mountain for 30 years. My granddaddy before him. The Ironhearts, we had coal dust in our blood. But I was different. First one in my family to go to college. Got my degree in mining engineering from WVU, thought I was real smart. Thought I could keep the mountain safe and still make the company happy. Boy, was I wrong about that. Coal Hill wasn't much of a town. Maybe 800 people if you counted the dogs. Just a bunch of company houses scattered around the mine entrance like somebody had thrown them down the mountainside. The mine itself was a black mouth carved into the rock, with train tracks running right into the belly of the earth. Been operating since the 1920s, and it looked every year of it. That October, something was wrong with the mountain. Started small, equipment breaking down more than usual, weird sounds echoing through the tunnels. The miners were jumpy, talking about cold spots where there shouldn't be any. Tools moving on their own. Old-timers said the mountain was angry, but I figured it was just stress. Times were hard, and everybody knew the feds were sniffing around about safety violations. My daddy was getting worse, too. Black lung disease had been eating at him for years, turning his cough into something that sounded like gravel in a cement mixer. Some mornings I'd find him sitting on the porch, staring at the mine entrance like it was calling to him. "That mountain's got teeth, Sam," he told me one morning. His voice scratchy as sandpaper. "Been chewing up men for decades. Your brother knew that." My brother Jimmy had died in a cave-in 3 years back. I was supposed to inspect that section the day before, but I'd been busy with paperwork. Company paperwork. Sometimes I wondered if I could have seen the cracks, could have marked it unsafe, could have saved him. The company house I lived in was just like all the others. White paint peeling, coal dust settling on everything no matter how much you cleaned. But it was home. From my kitchen window, I could see the mine entrance and the big warning signs. Danger. Authorized personnel only. Those signs might as well have been invisible for all the good they did. I kept Jimmy's mining helmet on my kitchen table, still had his name scratched into the metal. Sometimes at night I'd see the light reflecting off it and think for just a second that he was sitting there, grinning at me like he used to when we were kids. The morning everything started going sideways, I got a call from Bobby Colson, my childhood buddy who'd worked his way up to crew foreman. Bobby never went to college, but he knew more about mining than my engineering textbooks ever taught me. "Sam, you better get down here," Bobby said, his voice tight. "We got another accident in Tunnel 7. Conveyor belt snapped, nearly took Jerry's arm off." "Equipment failure?" I asked, already knowing what he'd say. "That's the thing. Belt was brand new, just installed last week. Inspector said it looked like somebody cut it with a knife, real clean. But ain't nobody been in that section since yesterday." I hung up the phone and stared at Jimmy's helmet. The light fixture above it flickered once, then went steady. Just old wiring, I told myself. Everything in Coal Hill was old, but as I drove down some winding road to the mine, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the mountain. The trees looked wrong somehow, like they were leaning away from the mine entrance. Even the birds seemed quiet. At the mine office, Mr. Holloway was waiting for me, his expensive suit looking out of place among the coal dust and work boots. He was one of those executives who'd never been underground but thought he knew everything about mining. "Ironheart," he said, not bothering with pleasantries, "I need you to write up that conveyor accident as worker error. Jerry must have been careless. But the belt was cut clean through. No way that was careless." Holloway's eyes went cold. "Then it was sabotage. Either way, it's not equipment failure. The federal inspectors are already breathing down our necks. We can't afford to give them more ammunition." I wanted to argue, but I thought about Daddy's medical bills, about the mortgage on the company house. "I'll look into it," I said. "You'll write the report," Holloway corrected. "Today." As he walked away, I felt something settle in my stomach like a chunk of coal, heavy and black and burning slow. That's when I first noticed the handprint on my truck windshield. Perfect outline of a hand, but made of coal dust. Too big to be human, too clear to be accident. And it was on the inside of the glass. The handprint was still there when I got home that night, even after I'd scrubbed the windshield 3 times. In the kitchen light, it looked almost like it was moving, the coal dust shifting and swirling, but that was just my tired eyes playing tricks. I poured myself a whiskey and sat down across from Jimmy's helmet. The house felt too quiet, too empty. Outside, I could hear the mine's night shift starting up, the rumble of equipment, the distant sound of voices echoing off the mountain. That's when she knocked on my door. "Mr. Ironheart? I'm Maggie Chen from the Environmental Law Foundation." She was small, maybe 5'4", but her handshake felt strong enough to crack walnuts. Asian features, expensive, looking jacket that hadn't seen a day of coal dust. City lawyer through and through. "If you're here about the mining permits, you need to talk to Holloway," I said. "Actually, I'm here about you." She held up a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. "I've been reviewing safety reports going back 20 years. Your name's on a lot of them, the honest ones." I let her in, mainly because I was curious. She spread papers across my kitchen table right next to Jimmy's helmet. "Look at this pattern," she said, pointing to charts and graphs. "Every time there's a serious safety concern, there are 2 reports filed. One that tells the truth, signed by you, and one that covers it up, signed by your supervisors." She was right. I'd been writing honest reports for 5 years, watching them get buried under company lies. "What's your point?" "My point is that men are dying because of those cover-ups, your brother included." That hit me like a punch to the gut. "You don't know anything about my brother." "I know he died in a tunnel you'd marked as unsafe. I know the company ordered him to work there anyway. And I know you've been carrying that guilt around like a stone in your chest." I wanted to throw her out, but the papers on the table told a story I'd been trying to forget. Column after column of safety violations, each one signed off as acceptable risk by men who'd never set foot underground. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Help me prove the company's been covering up safety violations. Testify before the federal commission." "And lose my job? This whole town depends on the mine." She leaned back in her chair. "This whole town depends on miners coming home alive." After she left, I sat in the dark for a long time, staring at the papers she'd left behind. The numbers were damning. 3 times as many accidents as the company reported. Safety equipment that was 25 hits. Years out of date. Inspections that were pure fiction. Around midnight, I heard something that made my blood freeze. The sound of mining equipment starting up. But the night shift had ended. Hours ago. I looked out my window toward the mine entrance. The floodlights were off, but I could see something moving in the darkness. Heavy machinery, conveyor belts, the big digging equipment, all running on their own. I grabbed a flashlight and walked down to the mine. The closer I got, the louder the equipment sounded. But when I reached the entrance, everything was silent. Dark. The machinery sat there like sleeping monsters. But the coal dust on the ground showed fresh tire tracks, deep gouges where equipment had been moving. And in the middle of it all, another handprint. This one the size of a manhole cover. I followed the tracks into Tunnel 7, where Jerry had his accident. The tunnel stretched away into darkness, supported by wooden beams that groaned and creaked with the weight of the mountain above. My flashlight cut through the dark, but it seemed like the shadows were pushing back. That's when I heard the voice. Sam. Just my name, spoken soft like a whisper, but it echoed through the tunnel like thunder. I spun around, flashlight beam dancing across the walls. Jimmy? The word came out before I could stop it. Sam, why didn't you save me? The voice was coming from deeper in the tunnel. I followed it, even though every instinct told me to run. The wooden support beams looked different in my flashlight. Twisted, like they were writhing. And the coal dust on the floor was moving, swirling in patterns that spelled out words. Guilty, coward, murderer. It wasn't my fault, I said to the empty tunnel. But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in a second. My breath came out in white puffs and frost started forming on the tunnel walls. In that frost, I could see shapes, faces, dozens of them, all looking at me with empty eye sockets. The miners who'd died in this mountain over the decades, including Jimmy. His feet, Ace formed in the frost right in front of me, clear as a photograph. His mouth opened and coal dust poured out instead of words. I ran like the devil himself was chasing me, which maybe he was. Behind me, I could hear the sound of mining equipment starting up again, metal grinding against metal, conveyor belts squealing. But when I looked back, the tunnel was empty. I made it to my truck and drove home with the radio turned up loud, trying to drown out the sound of my own heartbeat. But even with the music playing, I could still hear that whisper echoing in my head. Why didn't you save me? The next morning, I found Bobby waiting for me at the mine office. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, which maybe he had. Sam, we need to talk, he said. Something happened down in 7 last night. What kind of something? The kind that makes you want to quit mining and take up farming. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands. Equipment was running all night, by itself. No operators, no power to that section. But come morning, a whole new section had been dug out. Perfect work, like somebody'd been mining for 20 years. He showed me the production reports. Impossible numbers. More coal extracted in one night than the whole crew could dig in a week. There's something else, Bobby said. We found a body. My heart stopped. Who? Don't know yet. Been down there a long time, maybe decades. But here's the weird part. He was clutching a safety report. One of yours. The real one about Tunnel 7. The one that said it was unsafe. That's when I knew the mountain was trying to tell me something. And I was finally ready to listen. The body they found belonged to Marcus Webb, a safety inspector who'd disappeared in 1952. Same job as me, same company, same mountain. And clutched in his skeletal fingers was a carbon copy of a safety report warning about structural instability in what would become Tunnel 7. 35 years, Bobby said as we stood over the remains. He's been down here 35 years holding on to that paper. The report was yellow, with age, but the words were still clear. Immediate evacuation recommended. Structural failure imminent. Just like the report I'd written about this same section 3 years ago, the one that got buried while Jimmy died. Dr. Sarah Mills, the company medic, knelt beside the body. Cause of death was crushing injuries, she said. But that's not the strange part. Look at this. The skeleton was surrounded by coal dust arranged in perfect patterns, circles within circles, like something you'd see in those crop circle pictures. And at the center of each circle, a handprint. The same impossible handprints I'd been finding all over town. Someone's playing games, said Holloway, who'd shown up to control the scene. Probably environmental nuts trying to scare us into shutting down. But I noticed he wouldn't step inside the circle of coal dust, and his expensive suit couldn't hide the fierce sweat on his forehead. That afternoon, Maggie found me at my kitchen table, staring at Jimmy's helmet again. I heard about the body, she said. 35 years of cover-ups. How many more Marcus Webbs are buried in this mountain? Too many, I said. And I meant it. Looking at those handprints around Marcus Webb's body, I'd finally understood what was happening. The mountain wasn't just angry, it was keeping score. "The company's planning something," Maggie said. "I intercepted communications about bringing in federal investigators next week. They're going to pin everything on individual workers, make it look like a few bad miners caused all the accidents. They can't do that. They can if there's no one left to contradict their story." That night, the mountain showed me just how right she was. I was awakened by screaming. Real screaming, not the phantom voices I'd been hearing. I ran outside and saw lights flashing down at the mine, emergency vehicles, ambulances, half the town, running toward the entrance. The night shift had been trapped in a cave-in. 7 men caught in Tunnel 4 when the ceiling came down like the wrath of God. But this wasn't like other accidents. The support beams hadn't rotted or shifted. They'd been twisted into knots, like somebody had braided them like hair. Bobby met me at the rescue staging area, his face white as limestone. "It ain't natural, Sam. I've seen cave-ins before, but this... The rocks fell in perfect lines, like something arranged them." We worked for 6 hours, digging through tons of fallen stone. Found 4 men alive, 2 dead, 1 missing. The missing man was Tom Holloway, the owner's nephew. Fresh out of college, down in the mine for his first real look at the family business. "He was standing right beside me," said Pete Kowalski, one of the survivors. Then the lights went out and something grabbed him. Something big. Felt like hands made of stone. They found Tom's body 3 hours later in a section of tunnel that had been sealed off since the 1950s. No way he could have gotten there through the cave-in. But there he was, crushed flat, with coal dust handprints covering his body like tattoos. Mr. Holloway arrived just as they brought his nephew's body up. I expected him to be grief-stricken, but instead he looked terrified. He kept glancing at the mine entrance like something might come crawling out. "Shut it down," he whispered to his foreman. "Seal the entrances. We're done." "Sir, we can't just abandon the operation. The contracts, the investors—" "I said shut it down." Holloway's voice cracked like a whip. "Board it up, fill it with concrete, I don't care. Nothing goes in or out of that mountain." But the mountain had other ideas. That night, every piece of mining equipment in Coal Hill started up at exactly midnight. Not just the big machines at the mine, every drill, every conveyor, every pump in every garage and basement in town. They ran for exactly 1 hour, then stopped all at once. In the morning, we found messages carved into every metal surface in town, about same words repeated over and over. "No more lies. No more death. The mountain remembers." And the handprints were everywhere. On windows, on car hoods, on the sides of houses. Always the same size, always made of coal dust, always impossible to explain. The federal investigators arrived that afternoon, but they might as well have saved themselves the trip. Half the townspeople had already packed up and left. The other half were too scared to talk. I found Maggie at the diner, trying to interview the few people who hadn't run. She looked as shaken as the rest of us. "This isn't just about safety violations anymore," she said. "Something's been building in that mountain for decades. All the death, all the cover-ups, all the lies. It's like they created something that won't rest until there's justice." "Or revenge," I said. That's when Bobby burst through the diner door, wild-eyed and panicked. "Sam, you gotta come quick. It's your daddy." We found Ezra at the mine entrance, standing perfectly still with his eyes rolled back white. His mouth was open, and when he spoke, it wasn't his voice coming out. "Samuel Ironheart," the voice said, deep and hollow like an echo from the bottom of a well. "Your family has served this mountain for 3 generations. Your grandfather knew the old ways, respected the spirits that sleep in the stone. But you forgot. You chose their money over our lives." "Daddy?" I stepped closer, but the thing wearing my father's body turned its white eyes on me. "We are the voices of the forgotten dead. We are the miners who died for profit, who were buried in lies. We are Marcus Webb, Tom Holloway, Jimmy Ironheart. We are the mountain's memory, and we will have justice." My father's body collapsed. And when he opened his eyes again, they were his own. But they held a message I couldn't ignore. The mountain was done waiting. My daddy was in the hospital, hooked up to machines that beeped and whirred like mining equipment. The doctor said it was his lungs finally giving out, but I knew better. Whatever had spoken through him had left something behind, a connection to the thing that lived in the mountain's heart. "It showed me things, Sam," he whispered, gripping my hand with fingers that felt cold as stone. "All the men who died down there, they're not gone. They're part of something bigger now. Something that won't let the killing continue. What does it want? Truth. Justice. For the families to know their sons didn't die because they were careless or unlucky. They died because rich men decided their lives were worth less than coal." Outside the hospital window, I could see the mine entrance. Even from 2 miles away, it looked different. The opening seemed deeper, darker, like it was growing, and the mountains around it were changing too. Trees dying, rocks cracking, the very earth pulling away from the mine like infected flesh around a wound. Maggie found me there, staring out at the mountain. "The federal team is packing up," she said. "They're calling it a natural disaster, seismic activity causing structural failures. They won't even investigate the safety violations. Because Holloway paid them off? Because Holloway's dead." That stopped me cold. "What?" "Found him in his office an hour ago. Heart attack, they're saying. But Sam," she showed me a photograph on her phone. "Look at his desk." The picture showed Holloway slumped over papers scattered across his desk. But the papers weren't random. They were arranged in a perfect spiral, with coal dust handprints marking each document. And in the center of the spiral, a single sheet of paper with 2 words written in coal dust. "It's time." "The mine's calling for you," Maggie said. "Whatever's down there, it wants to talk." I wanted to run, wanted to pack up Daddy's things and get us both far away from Coal Hill. But I could feel the pull of the mountain like a fishhook in my chest. It had been calling to me since I was a boy, whispering, through the walls of our company house, singing in the wind that blew down from the peaks. The Ironhearts belonged to this mountain, always had. That night I went down to the mine alone. The entrance was different, bigger somehow, and the darkness inside wasn't just absence of light. It was presence of something else, something vast and patient and hungry for truth. I walked into Tunnel 7 with Jimmy's helmet on my head, its light cutting a thin beam through the darkness. The walls were covered with handprints now, thousands of them, each one telling the story of a man who died for coal company profits. "I'm here," I called out. "I'm listening." The temperature dropped, and my breath came out in white clouds that hung in the air like ghost words. The coal dust on the floor began moving, swirling into patterns that hurt to look at. And from somewhere deeper in the tunnel, I heard the sound of footsteps. Heavy footsteps, like someone wearing mining boots made of stone. It came out of the darkness slowly, and I understood why the Cherokee had called this mountain sacred. The thing walking toward me wasn't just a ghost or a spirit. It was the mountain itself, given form and voice by decades of death and betrayal. 7 feet tall, made of living coal with veins of fire running through its body like arteries. Its face was a compilation of every miner who'd ever died in these tunnels, their features shifting and changing like smoke. But at its center, glowing orange-red like a furnace, was a heart that beat with the rhythm of mining equipment, steady and relentless. "Samuel Ironheart," it said, and its voice was the sound of 1,000 men speaking in unison. "Son of Ezra, brother of James, you carry the mountain's blood, but you serve its enemies." I tried to tell the truth, I said. I wrote the reports. Reports that were buried, reports that changed nothing. It stepped closer, and I could feel heat radiating from its coal-black skin. "Your brother died because you chose safety over courage, chose your job over his life." That was the truth I'd been hiding from for 3 years. I could have raised hell about Tunnel 7. Could have gone to the newspapers, the federal inspectors, anyone who would listen. Instead, I'd filed my report and hoped someone else would do the right thing. I was a coward, I said. Yes. The coal heart reached out with one massive hand and touched Jimmy's helmet on my head. For a moment I saw my brother as he'd been in life, grinning, fearless, trusting his big brother to keep him safe. But cowardice can be cured if the price is paid. What price? Instead of answering, it showed me. The tunnel around us faded, and suddenly I was standing in a vast cavern beneath the mountain. The walls were covered with the names of every miner who'd ever died, carved in stone, glowing with their own inner light. Hundreds of names, going back to the very first shaft sunk in 1898. And at the center of the cavern, a pool of black water that reflected not the ceiling above, but the sky. In that water, I could see the truth of what had happened in this mountain. Every corner cut, every safety regulation ignored, every life sacrificed for profit margins. The mountain keeps its own records, the coal heart said. Every death, every lie, every moment of betrayal. And now, it's time for judgment. On who? On all of them. The owners, the supervisors, the inspectors who looked the other way. They will face the miners they killed. I watched in the black water as the coal heart's plan unfolded. Every person responsible for the deaths would be brought down into the mountain, forced to experience what their victims had felt in their final moments. The terror of being trapped, the crushing weight of stone, the low realization that no help was coming. And me? I asked. You will bear witness. You will tell their story. You will make sure the world knows that these men did not die because they were careless, but because they were expendable. The vision faded, and we were back in Tunnel 7. But now I could see it clearly. My choice wasn't between safety and danger. It was between truth and lies, between justice and profit, between the living and the dead. I'll do it, I said. I'll tell their story. The coal heart nodded slowly. Then let us begin. The mountain shook, and somewhere above us, I heard the sound of the federal investigators' cars starting up. But they wouldn't make it far. The mountain had been patient for 70 years. It was done waiting. They found me 3 days later, unconscious at the mine entrance with Jimmy's helmet still on my head. Severe hypothermia, the doctor said, and possible brain damage from oxygen deprivation. But I knew the truth. I'd been touched by something older than coal, older than the mountain itself. The federal investigation lasted 2 weeks. They found everything, every buried report, every covered-up accident, every life lost to corporate greed. The coal heart had made sure of that, leading investigators to hidden files, sealed records, evidence that should have been destroyed decades ago. 17 people were indicted, including 3 Holloway mining executives who were found in the deepest part of Tunnel 7, crushed by a cave-in that the engineers said was impossible. The coroner ruled it accidental, but I knew better. The mountain had collected its debts. Maggie helped me organize the miners' families, started a foundation to make sure the truth stayed told. We named it the Marcus Webb Foundation, after the inspector who'd held on to his integrity even in death. The Coal Hill mine was permanently sealed, filled with concrete, and marked with a memorial listing every name carved in that underground cavern. But the mountain wasn't finished with me. I still feel it sometimes, especially on cold nights when the wind blows down from the peaks, a presence in my chest, warm and heavy as coal. The coal heart left part of itself in me, I think, a reminder, a responsibility. My daddy passed 6 months later, but he went peaceful. His last words were a message for me. The mountain's watching, Sam, but it ain't angry anymore. It's grateful. I moved to Charleston, work for the state, now investigating mining safety violations. Good work, important work. But sometimes I'll be reviewing accident reports, and I'll find coal dust on the papers. Perfect handprints, too big to be human, reminding me that some debts can never be fully paid. Maggie and I got married last spring. She still fights the coal companies, still pushes for better safety standards. Sometimes she asks me about that night in the mine, about what really happened down there. I tell her the truth, that I met something that loved the mountain more than any human ever could, and it taught me the price of looking away from injustice. The Coal Hill mine has been closed for 5 years now, but sometimes hunters report strange lights coming from the sealed entrance. Sometimes they hear the sound of mining equipment running deep underground, like the mountain is still digging, still searching for the truth. And sometimes, when the coal companies get too greedy, too careless with miners' lives, they find coal dust handprints on their office windows, a reminder that the mountain is still watching, still keeping score, still protecting its children. I keep Jimmy's helmet on my desk now, next to pictures of every miner who died in Coal Hill. Their names are carved in stone in that sealed cavern, but their stories live on in every safety regulation passed, every life saved by better oversight, every family that doesn't have to lose a son to corporate greed. The coal heart kept its bargain. The truth got told, but late at night, and I'm alone in my office reviewing safety reports. I can still feel it watching. Not threatening, not angry, just present. A reminder that some promises are written in stone, and some debts are paid in more than money. The mountain remembers everything. And now, so do I. The coal companies know it too. Word gets around in the mining community. There's something in those West Virginia mountains that won't let the old ways continue. Something that demands respect for the men who die in darkness, so the world above can have light. They call it the coal heart curse now, but I know better. It's not a curse, it's a guardian, and it's still watching.